Campbell Miller, husband, father of two, and feature film director with EWTN. Faith and Life tells the stories of Catholics living their life through their faith. These inspiring people tell us where they have come from and where God is taking them. In this episode of Faith and Life, we'll be chatting to Father Flynn. Father is the prior of the pilgrimage site Lough Derg in County Donegal, Ireland. Lough Derg dates back to the 5th century and is situated on Station Island. We'll be starting off our day with a boat ride. Father, tell us about the history of Lough Derg.
Originally, this island, Station Island, was a retreat away from the monastic community which lived on Saints Island, which we'll talk about later, please God. And the monks could withdraw here for their deeper times of prayer. Right. And where the bell tower is now, is the location of what is referred to usually as the cave, but it wasn't ever a cave in the sense of a cavern in the rocks. In medieval times, the monks welcomed penitents or pilgrims who would come. They would have their spiritual preparation in the monastery in Saints Island and then be rowed across here for 24 hours in the cave, which was known in medieval Europe as St. Patrick's Purgatory. There are scholars that think that Dante's journey through the underworld in the Divine Comedy was influenced by some of these tales from Lough Derg. So in the Reformation times then, when we had the dissolution of the monasteries, there were no longer clergy here. There were Franciscan priests who were on the run, came to minister to those who came to make pilgrimage here. So ordinary people came and they offered what I regard as a prayer of the dispossessed. They had no longer buildings in which to gather and pray and Mass and sacraments. So they came to places like this where there was a tradition of prayer and of holiness. And they said there are fathers and their Hail Marys and the Apostles' Creed, the basic prayers of the Catholic tradition. The Reformers regarded a place like this as a bastion of superstition and so on, and so there was a religious fervour about putting an end to it, and they cleared every last thing of this island. There were to be no stones left that could be used to rebuild anything, and further up here we'll see St. Patrick's Cross, which is the oldest artefact now and which was rescued from the lake. They didn't throw it far enough. We have a drawing of the island published in a book in 1660, and these beds are more or less, they're shown as these circles with openings. So imagine that these were beehive-shaped huts originally. Everything was level. So the prayer pattern here is made walking around the beds, walking around the outside kneeling, walking around the inside kneeling, and so on. So the beds, in that sense, they're a reconstruction.
Father, you grew up in Rosslea, County Fermanagh. Tell me, what are your memories from back then?
It was a border village out of Rosslea. 3 of the roads within a mile lead to the border with County Monaghan.
And your father ran the pub?
We had a pub.
Also the grocery store?
We had a pub, and there was a grocery. I'd say I was about 6 or 7 when the grocery store closed. And but the pub was there until my parents retired in 1972, and it was part of my growing up, kind of suppose as a youngster, kind of, and I was helping to sweep up and do chores, pack shelves, that kind of thing. And then later, I would have served in the bar, and I don't remember my daddy ever working. Now, he might occasionally have poured a bottle or something like that, but I don't remember him working behind the counter in the bar. My mother was the one who mostly did that.
You've got some photographs here, and just looking at this one here first, I take it this is your mother and father?
Yeah, Dad and Mum, yes. Towards the end of Mum's life, I think that was maybe the summer before she died. So that would be maybe 1975.
There's a lovely photograph of your mum, clearly in the bar.
Behind the bar, yes, indeed. I mean, that's my mother as I remember her as a younger woman. And, you know, when I would be behind the bar, I mean, that was when I was learning from her how to engage with people. And it was a very useful learning for me, in that it taught me to come out of myself and to make conversation with people, and to find out what were the things that somebody was interested in, so that they would be able to engage in a conversation. Oh, I owe that very much to my mother.
So those skills that you learnt back then are very much in use today?
Are they?
I'm saying that.
I hope so. No, I'm grateful. I'm very grateful, and I know really that it was my mother that taught me those.
Father La has a great sense of humour. I go so far as to say that it's a wicked sense of humour. He's renowned for the one-liners. Even in the most serious of situations, he'll always find something to come in that will be sharp, that will be witty, and then he'll take a good laugh at it himself. So even when something is very serious and there's a lot of debate, there is a great sense of humour, and there's a twinkle in the eye. It's the twinkle in the eye that's one of the most endearing features.
My dad was a shy man. He was very, very gentle man, very, very tender-hearted. Tear would come to his eye very easily. I remember Mammy saying, "Oh, your daddy cry for the ducks going barefooted, you know." There were 5 of us in the family. My brother was in Maynooth as a seminarian for 4 years.
Right.
Okay. My next sister tried Franciscan life as a novice for about a year and a half. The middle sister was the only one who would not give it a go, Tess. Okay. Patsy is a religious sister of mercy in the convent in Enniskillen, and myself. So of the 5 of us in the house, only the middle sister, who actually, in my childhood was closest for me, she tells the story that she used to pray for a baby brother. So there was my oldest brother, and then the 3 girls, and they kind of came close together. And then there was 9 years between the youngest of them and myself.
Right. Okay.
And Tess used to pray and light candles and she used to ask Nurse Durkin, who was the local district nurse and midwife, you know, kind of, maybe sometime now you'll bring a baby to Mammy, you know. She thought that the district nurse brought them in the big bag, that's where they, wasn't it innocent now?
That is very innocent.
And Tess was 10 years old when I was born, and still thought that babies came in the bag that the midwife carried, you know.
And these photographs here, when and where did they take place?
Okay, so these are photographs of my ordination as deacon. My mother was still there for my ordination as deacon. As it happened, I would normally have been ordained deacon in Rome, but because I had missed the early year examinations, I couldn't be ordained with the rest of the class. And so the ordination. So as it happened, Mum was able to be at my ordination as deacon and didn't live to see me ordained as a priest. So this is a family group with let's see, your Morris, who was the parish priest at that time, and this is Bishop Mulligan, who had been the president in St. Michael's when I was at secondary school, and then was the bishop through most of my time in seminary, and the man who ordained me, and the man who first sent me here to Lochderg to fill in for another priest for a few weeks, and as they say, the rest is history.
Father, we're here in St. Patrick's Basilica. Take us through the journey to becoming the prior here of Lochderg.
I had 5 appointments that were pastoral appointments. My first year I was in the Cathedral Parish in Monaghan. I then was 12 years teaching in St. McCartan's, teaching second level, and I taught religion and English and music, and I also directed the choir in the cathedral at that time in Monaghan. Then I had 4 years as a curate in Carrickmacross in South Monaghan. Then I was 4 years in Kitui in eastern Kenya. Clogher Diocese had a partnership with Kitui, and 2 priests would go for 4 years and be replaced then by 2 others. And Kitui is about 100 miles due east of Nairobi. Very, very rural place, semi-arid, suffers a lot from recurring droughts, very much off the tourist trail.
So that must have been difficult, not only with those conditions, but also, I'm sure, learning the language.
We had done a few weeks of Swahili before we went out, and then when we were in country we did 6 weeks in Nairobi, formal language in Swahili, but the language that was used was the local tribal language, Kikamba, which had a similar structure, some elements of similarity in vocabulary, but is partly a tonal language. For example, in the Mass, in any and go on, you see to lift up your hearts, okay? But the word for Ngo for a heart, right?
Yes.
Ngo is a heart, Ngo is a leopard, and Ngo is firewood. So I was telling the people sometimes to lift up their leopards and sometimes to lift up their firewood, and of course they were falling about it until I realized there's something that needs to be sorted out here. I came back from Kenya. I had some sabbatical time. I went to St. Bino's in Wales and did the 3-month program there, including the spiritual exercises of Ignatius. Okay, I had 18 months then leading into animating the Jubilee year 2000 here in Clogher Diocese, and from there that brought Bishop Duffy, then Bishop Joe Duffy was our bishop, to ask me to take on adult faith development, and I was full-time on that for a few years, and then I was parish priest in Ballybay for 13 years before I came here in 2017. We were in between bishops at that time, and Joe McGuinness, who was administering the diocese, asked me if I would take on Lochderg. Now, he knew we had worked together here at a time, so he knew that I had a heart for Lochderg.
To run Lochderg, there must be a considerable amount of people involved in making a 3-day pilgrimage happen, and to manage all of these buildings and a boat. That was something you weren't trained for.
I see it very much as leader of a team. We have a great team here. We have a team of 10 permanent staff, between office staff and the 3 men who kind of work here all year round, and so on, and a lot of those are people with long-term experience of Lochderg and great loyalty to Lochderg, and they're a joy to work with.
Father, we're in this beautiful basilica. When does it date back to?
It dates back to the 1920s. Pope Pius XI gave it the title of Basilica because of its association with a very distinctive and ancient place of pilgrimage. And his papal coat of arms is shown over the the entrance to the main door. One of our great glories here are the 14 stained glass windows, which are the work of Harry Clark, the renowned Dublin stained glass artist. Right. And he did a very clever thing. He made the Stations of the Cross, the images of the Stations of the Cross, in smaller panels, right? And yes, each panel is held by the figure of one of the apostles. So 12 apostles plus St. Paul,
yes,
who's not one of the 12,
no,
plus Our Lady as Queen of the Apostles makes the 14. And the figures of the apostles and Our Lady are very still, almost iconic, very, okay? Mm-hmm. And the action then in the panels of the station is vibrant, and the detail in them is splendid. And very often there's one or other figure in the panel is looking straight out at the person who's contemplating the way of the cross. The sanctuary was remodeled in the 1980s.
Okay.
One of the features that was introduced was this cross. Now, the shape of it is modelled on the penal cross. The arms are not elongated, okay, so that they're slim in design, and you can hide it up your sleeve or in your pocket or whatever in persecution times.
Yes.
Okay? There is a small penal cross kept on the island that was found clutched in the hand of a pilgrim who was drowned in the boating accident. We had just one major boating accident. Over 90 people lost their lives in July of 1793, I think it was.
Yeah.
So Imogen Stewart, the great carver, was commissioned to make a cross for the sanctuary, and used the idea of the penal cross, but in these terms rather than in the tiny terms in which it usually appears.
That's lovely. And also on the penal cross there is a cock and pot. What does that resemble?
Okay, that turns up sometimes, not invariably, quite often on the penal cross. Okay, there's a version of the story, it's a folk tale, and the story is that the soldiers who were guarding the tomb of Jesus were cooking their chicken, their supper, and one said to the other, "What do you think about this thing that your man is supposed to rise from the dead?" And his companion says, "He'll no more rise from the dead than the chicken will rise from the dead." And of course, the chicken flew out of the pot. And very interesting, in the Irish version of the story, what is it crowing? It's crowing, "Mach na hoigas long, the virgin son is safe." It's a resurrection symbol, therefore.
Yes.
For those who know the story, it's a resurrection symbol on the penal cross.
Lough Derg is now here 1,500 years. Why is it still such a special place?
I like to think that part of it is that people know they are welcome here. People know they will be received here, whatever their story, whatever their background. You don't have to be a Roman Catholic to come here and to be welcome here.
He makes people feel at ease, and probably one of the greatest gifts that he possesses is his wonderful personality. He's a wonderful listener. One of his many charisms is that of being able to listen to people, afford people time and space to communicate with him. He's a very, very gifted, talented and wise person.
When someone comes here on a 3-day pilgrimage, what does that entail?
Well, first thing they do is they get their accommodation, and they take off their shoes, come out on the island, and they have 3 rounds to make. Now, the full round takes over an hour, about an hour and 10 minutes, so of prayer in around the basilica, and then around these penitential beds.
And is there certain prayers that they're saying?
Yes, there are. Essentially, the Lord's Prayer, the Hail Mary, and the Apostles' Creed. Okay. And it's very interesting that we have, from about 1600, we have a rhymed version or a poetic version in Irish of what the prayers were, and they're substantially the same as they are today. So that's the way the tradition goes back on that. And so that takes them through a lot of the first day. For the night then, they are on vigil from 10 o'clock on the evening of their first day until 10 o'clock on the evening of their second day. They're up all night. They make the same round of prayers and the same actions, but they make them in common in the basilica, walking around in the basilica. 3 stations on the first day, 4 stations during the night, and on the second day there are a number of liturgies, a renewal of baptismal promises, an evening mass and so on. And at night prayer then, the vigil candle, which is lighted as they begin their vigil, is quenched, and they say the canticle of Simeon, "At last, all-powerful Master, you give leave to your servant to go in peace according," and they say it with great gusto as the time comes to go to. And then their second night on the island, they're in bed, and then up for a morning mass on the third morning, and they leave about 10 o'clock, and I would see them off on the boats.
And we should say they do all of this in Burford.
All of this in Burford, yes indeed. Here at the water's edge, the last movement is here, and people stand here and say 5 Our Fathers, 5 Hail Marys, and the Apostles' Creed, and then they kneel and say the same prayers, and this is more or less the last movement after all the way. So this is a quiet stationary movement rather than walking. There's something about the value of the water, the just standing at the water. A lot of pilgrims refer to the specialness of this particular moment. In the historical record, we know that it used to be that people stood in the water and knelt in the water.
Has there been great moments in your time here that people have reconnected with God?
Oh, there have been. There have been, and again and again. My colleague Eamon Conway, whom I actually met here, Eamon is a priest of Tuam Diocese and works in the theology department in Limerick, and is a regular member of our team here, and does the pilgrimage every year. But I actually first met Eamon when he came to serve here as a cantor, while he was still a seminarian. But Eamon uses this expression, an island of quiet miracles. People talk about miracles in Lourdes and so on. Eamon is very keen, from his experience, particularly as a confessor and accompanying people who come here. He talks about the quiet miracles, that there aren't people throwing away crutches.
Yes.
The miracles here tend to be within, or maybe in relationship, or somebody has been carrying something for years, is able to leave it and somehow or other move on.
They're able, as they walk on their bare feet, they're able to leave those struggles and those hurts with the island.
Yes, many of them express it that way, that they were able to leave behind. A few years ago, on our one-day retreats, which we also offer, Mary McDade is another regular member of our pastoral team here. Mary invited people at the end of her talk to pick a stone out of a basket that was passed along, and to carry the stone with them, you know, and that when it was right, they could throw the stone into the lake. They could drop it into the lake, or they could fling it into the lake. Okay, but it was fascinating.
Yes.
People who chose to come, they're not expected to, but people who chose to come to confession very often produced the stone.
Okay.
And used the stone to talk about whatever it was that they wanted to bring to the Lord. And I know there's one lovely story that Mary told back to me about a married couple. I think they were married something like 40 years, and they actually came here to the water's edge, and 1, 2, 3, the two of them together flung their stones into the water as a way of leaving behind any hurts or anything in their relationship over there. Oh, what a lovely moment. So coming then from the water's edge, the pilgrim comes to St. Patrick's Cross for a last brief prayer of the concluding prayer of the station. So what we have here is actually the shaft of a cross. Missing is the cross head, and this is one of the stones on the island that was thrown into the lake in that 1632 time, but it wasn't thrown far enough, and they recovered 2 pieces. You can see the break about a quarter way up, so they recovered the base and the shaft, but not the cross head. This little metal cross is just obviously a makey-uppy because they didn't retrieve the original stone head of the cross. It's a 9th century piece of work, and to think of all the people who have prayed at this cross over those centuries. For me, this is the most precious physical relic on the island. More years than not, I have done the pilgrimage myself. You know, and it's great when you're kind of working here, you know, a pilgrim will say to you, you know, and do you ever do it yourself, Father? You know, so it's good to be able to look them in the eye and say, yes, last week, you know. So that you know what they're going through and so on. And again, of course, it means that you can talk to their experience.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah. Father La, thank you very much for the invite here to Lough Derg, for showing us around and spending so much time with us.
It's been a pleasure. We'll
Thank
see
you.
you again sometime. Perhaps in your bare feet.
You never know.
You never know.
I love the quietness found here, the opportunity to disconnect from the world, from emails, social media, phone calls, etc. We get to reconnect with God and strengthen our spiritual muscle to face daily struggles that lie ahead. The reasons for going on a pilgrimage can be deeply personal, no matter what the reason. It's a gift from God that allows us to grow in our faith, hope, and love.